A black single father walked into the lobby of one of the most exclusive beach resorts in the country, just before sunset gray hoodie. Sand-scuffed sneakers, a duffel bag over one shoulder, and his 5-year-old son riding on his hip, half asleep. A floppy, stuffed elephant dangling from one small fist. He came to check in. The front desk manager looked the two of them up and down. Once. And then said, loud enough for the guests in the marble lobby to hear. No, absolutely not. You're trash, the kind of filth that wanders up from the public beach hoping nobody's watching, and somebody behind this desk finally has the spine to say it to your face before you stink up a lobby. These guests pay a fortune to stand in. The father did not set his son down. Good evening, he said quietly. I have a reservation. It's under my name. A reservation. The manager gave a short, practiced laugh. The laugh of a man who believed he could read a person's whole life in 4 seconds. I'm sure you do. Do you have any idea what one night costs here? More than that duffel bag and everything in it. This is the Azure Crest. Not a roadside motel. Our guests arrive by private car. They have account managers, standing suites, relationships with this property that go back years. They do not stroll in off the sand at sunset in a hoodie with a child on their hip and announce they've booked a room. My son and I have been traveling since 5 this morning. The father said. He's exhausted. I booked an oceanfront room 3 weeks ago. I'd just like the key. And I'm telling you to look at where you are. The manager's voice dropped. Smooth and certain. Pitched for the room. Whatever you think you booked. There's clearly been a mistake. And I am not going to process it in front of these guests and make them watch. There's a budget motel out by the highway. 20 minutes back the way you came. That's the kind of place that takes walk-ins who look like you. So pick up your bag and your boy and go find it before I have to make this into a scene neither of us wants. Because a man dressed like you, carrying a child into a lobby like this, expecting an oceanfront suite, isn't just out of place. It's the kind of thing that makes the people who actually belong here deeply uncomfortable. And I will not have it at sunset on a full house. And the father, he was saying all of this to Marcus Reed, 35 years old, standing in the soaring marble and driftwood lobby of the Azure Crest, just as the light went gold over the water. His 5-year-old son Eli, asleep on his hip with a stuffed elephant named Peanut hanging from one fist, looked at the front desk manager in his crisp linen blazer for a long, quiet moment. He did not raise his voice. He did not push past. He glanced once around the beautiful lobby he had personally signed off on. Every beam of that driftwood ceiling. Then back at the man. And he said, very gently, then I'd like to speak with whoever runs this property tonight. He had no idea, and the man barring his way had even less of an idea, that the next 40 minutes were about to take that serene, golden, impossibly exclusive resort and turn it completely inside out, and that before the sun was fully down, someone would be fired where they stood. In a lobby full of witnesses who had no idea the man being turned away owned every grain of sand the building sat on. If you have ever carried something precious into a room and been made to feel the two of you didn't belong there, this one is for you. Stay with me. This is the story of Marcus, and the evening that changed the Azure Crest forever. Marcus Reed had not told anyone at the resort he was coming. That was the entire point. He had a habit of visiting his properties unannounced, dressed exactly as he was dressed now, hoodie, worn sneakers, no watch, nothing that announced money, because it was the only honest way to see what was actually happening inside his buildings. When no one was performing for the founder, his flight with Eli had landed late. A long travel day at the tail end of 3 weeks away on business. And rather than drive the extra hour to their own house, exhausted, with a 5-year-old melting down in the back seat. Marcus had made the call the way he made most calls, quickly, without ceremony, without announcing it to anyone. He knew exactly where they were going. The Azure Crest was the flagship of the Reed Coastal Group, the resort that had taken him 12 years to build. From a single failing beachfront inn he'd bought at auction with everything he had, into the property it was now. He had cut the ribbon here himself. He had stood on this marble floor on opening day and told his team that this place would be proof of something he believed all the way down to the bone, that luxury and decency were not opposites, that you could build something beautiful and exclusive and still treat the tired stranger at your desk with exactly the same grace you gave the man who arrived by helicopter. He had carved that into the company's founding values in plain words, because he knew how easily a building forgets the reason it was built once you hand it to other people to run. He had not been back to this location in 4 months, and he had not called ahead. And he had a particular reason to come in person, in his travel clothes, with his own son on his hip. He had been hearing things, quiet complaints, filtered up through 3 layers of staff, that the front of house at the Azure Crest had begun treating guests differently depending on how they looked when they walked in, that the wrong kind of arrival got a colder welcome, a longer wait, a subtler message that they were tolerated rather than wanted. So Marcus had done what he always did. He had not phoned the general manager. He had not sent a representative. He had not warned a single soul. He had simply put on his hoodie, picked up his sleeping boy, and walked into his own flagship at the busiest hour of the day to see, with his own eyes and on his own 2 feet. Exactly how the Azure Crest treated a family that walked in looking like it had nothing to its name. His own father had spent 24 years as a hotel doorman, a black man in a uniform worn thin at the cuffs, who stood at the entrance of a grand resort not unlike this one, and opened the door for people who never once looked him in the eye, who came home at night and sat at the kitchen table for a while in silence before he could become himself again. And something his father said had never left Marcus: that you learn everything about a place by how it treats the people it thinks it can afford to ignore. Not the guests it's trying to impress, the doorman, and the tired traveler in the wrong clothes, and the child nobody important is watching out for. There was one memory in particular Marcus had never been able to set down. When he was 7, his family had scraped together the money for one night at a nice hotel on a rare trip, the only real vacation of his childhood, and the man at that front desk had looked at his father's off-duty clothes and his mother's careful coat and decided, somehow, that their reservation must be a mistake, and had made the family stand to the side, in the lobby, for the better part of an hour while better-dressed guests were checked in around them. His father had stood there and absorbed it, jaw tight, one hand on his son's shoulder, taking it so the boy would not have to. They had gotten the room, in the end, but Marcus had carried that lobby with him for 28 years, and underneath every property he ever built was a 7-year-old standing to the side, watching his father be made small in his good clothes, building, brick by brick, the place that would never do that to anyone again. Eli had fallen asleep somewhere over the water on the last flight, and had not fully woken since. He was 5, all soft cheeks and serious questions, obsessed with the ocean and sharks, and the precise reason the tide comes in and goes out. He had his late mother's dimple and his father's stubborn streak, and he was currently using Marcus's shoulder as a pillow, one arm hooked loosely around his father's neck. Peanut the elephant clutched in the other fist. Marcus held him with one arm, the duffel on the opposite shoulder, and crossed the lobby slowly, mindful of the sleeping weight against his chest, toward the long front desk of pale driftwood. The lobby was exactly as he remembered it. Warm light off the water through floor-to-ceiling glass. The soft sound of a guitar from the terrace bar. The long desk, staffed at this hour by a single manager, and off to the side a young woman at the concierge stand. Marcus had signed off on every detail of that warmth himself. The manager was a man in his early 40s, well-groomed, linen blazer pressed even at the end of a long day. The kind of man who wore the resort's prestige like a garment he was afraid to crease. His name tag read, Trent. He looked up when Marcus approached, and something shifted in his face, not dramatically. Not yet. Just a quiet recalibration. The way a person's expression changes when their eyes hand their brain a verdict it has already reached. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the scuffed sneakers. He looked at the sleeping child and the floppy stuffed elephant. And then he looked back at his screen. That recalibration was the whole of it. Everything that came next was already written in that 1/2-second glance. The man behind the desk was named Trent Calloway, and there is a great deal to say about him. But the first thing to understand is the thing he understood about himself. That proximity to wealth was the entire foundation of his sense of his own importance. Trent, 41, had spent his career attaching himself to expensive places, learning their codes, mastering the art of making the right guests feel exclusive and the wrong ones feel small, because the wrong ones feeling small was, in his understanding, the very thing that made the right ones feel grand. He carried a private terror, the way the cruel so often do, that he was underneath the linen blazer. Ordinary, that he had no distinction of his own. Only the gatekeeper's knack for deciding who got past the desk. And so he guarded that desk ferociously, because every arrival he turned away was a way of standing, for a moment, securely on the inside of a door he secretly feared he had never really earned a place behind. He had a habit, when he was about to be cruel, of straightening the cuffs of his blazer, first one then the other, as if buttoning himself into the man of consequence he so badly needed the world to see. So when a father in a hoodie and worn sneakers carried a sleeping child up to his desk at 6:50 inches the evening, on a full house at sunset, Trent Calloway straightened his cuffs. And the evening began. You have already heard how it began, the trash. The filth that wanders up from the public beach. The budget motel by the highway. The people who actually belong, who shouldn't be made uncomfortable. That was 6:50. Hold on to the shape of it, because every word is going to be read back to him, in front of the whole lobby, and he does not know yet that the room is listening. At chasse, 15:03. Trent did the thing his kind do best, which was perform for an audience. A well-dressed couple stood nearby waiting for a bellhop. Golf bags and matching luggage at their feet, and Trent caught the woman's eye and said, just loud enough to carry, with a confiding, pained little smile. Every evening, someone wanders up from the public beach, access thinking a resort is a free hotel. You learn to move them along before it spoils the welcome for the guests who belong. The woman gave a small, uncomfortable laugh and looked away. There, right there, is your silent witness, the one who would lie awake on this for the rest of her life? Who in that moment said nothing at all. And Marcus simply stood and absorbed it. The second stone, without a flinch, his hands spread wide and steady across his sleeping son's back. At chasse, 15:06. When Marcus said, again, evenly, that he had a reservation and his son was exhausted, Trent let out a soft breath through his nose. Half a sigh, all pity, and leaned forward the way a man leans toward a child or a stray. Sir, he said, I've been more than patient. Do you understand what this property times is? The guests who stay here have relationships with this resort that go back years. They are known. They are expected. And you've walked in off the beach at sunset. in a hoodie, with a duffel bag and a sleeping child. Expecting me to simply hand you an oceanfront suite on our word? Where does a man like you find that kind of nerve? No. Whatever brought you up that path, it ends here. This is not a place for people like you. It never has been, and it never will be. Real talk. That is the whole of Trent Calloway in one breath. And he had no idea. He had just said it to the man whose name was on the deed, to the sand beneath his polished shoes. This is not a place for people like you. Hold on to that. It comes back. And when it does, it takes the floor out from under him. At Shasa Chinjzech Shinoa. Here is the thing that turned the cold cruelty into something the whole lobby could feel. The glass doors slid open, and a couple came in, a man in a yacht jacket, a woman in a sun hat that cost more than most people's rent. No luggage in hand. No reservation confirmed. Just the unhurried confidence of people who expect rooms to be available because, in their experience, rooms always are. And Trent Calloway's entire posture changed. His shoulders lifted. His smile arrived fast and warm and entirely genuine. Welcome back to the Azure Crest walk-in? Not a problem at all. We'll find you something beautiful. Let me see what oceanfront I have. Within 4 minutes, he had them booked. A suite assigned. 2 key cards slid across the driftwood with a warmth that filled the whole desk. Marcus watched every second of it, his son asleep against his chest. He said nothing. He did not need to. The message had been delivered without a single word. And both men understood it perfectly, even if only one of them would ever admit it. Eli stirred against his shoulder, his voice coming out thin and half-conscious, muffled into the fabric of his father's hoodie. Daddy? Are we at the hotel? Can I see the ocean now? Marcus pressed his lips to his son's hair and tightened his arm around him. We're here, buddy. Almost. Just give Daddy 1 minute. Then he turned back to the desk. And his voice was calm, the way very still. Water is calm, not because nothing is moving beneath it, but because whatever is moving has not yet decided to surface. I'd like to speak with the general manager, or whoever runs this property tonight. There's a young woman in this story, and her name is Daniela. She was 23, a concierge 6 weeks into her first hospitality job, and at 7:00, she was standing at the concierge stand, a few feet away. And she had been watching the whole thing with a color rising in her face she could not control. She had also, quietly, pulled up the reservation system on her screen. And she had found the name and the booking, an oceanfront room, paid in full 3 weeks ago, exactly where the father said it would be. She stepped out from behind the stand. Mr. Calloway, sir, I can confirm the reservation. I have it right here. Oceanfront. Prepaid. It's no trouble. I can just check him in myself. Daniela. Trent did not even turn his head. The turndown requests need logging. Go, log them. Now. And then, to Marcus, straightening his cuffs and recovering his thin smile. You'll have to forgive her. She's new. She still thinks anyone who walks in deserves a room. She'll learn how this place actually works. He glanced, pointedly, at the sneakers. You. Sir? Are tonight's lesson. Daniela did not go log the turndown requests. She took 2 steps back and stopped, her hands pressed flat on the concierge stand, her eyes shining and furious. And she did not look away. Remember, Daniela. Everything in this story comes back around to Daniela. At Shopta, Trey, Trent picked up the desk phone and made a short call. And within 2 minutes, the duty manager arrived. His name tag read, VA, mid-40s. A full suit at sunset, because authority, in his understanding, was something you maintained through surfaces. He had clearly been briefed before he reached the desk. Because he did not arrive with an open mind. He arrived with a conclusion already drawn. He positioned himself beside Trent in a way that made the geometry of the thing obvious. Two of them on one side of the desk. Marcus and his sleeping son on the other. "Sir," Vaughn said, "I understand there's been some confusion. My front desk manager has explained we're not able to accommodate you tonight. There's nothing further we can do. There's a perfectly good motel back toward the highway. I'd suggest you head there before it gets late for the boy." "There's no confusion," Marcus said, his voice still level. "I watched your manager book an oceanfront suite for a walk-in couple while telling me my prepaid reservation must be a mistake. My son is asleep on my shoulder. I'm asking you to explain that." Vaughn's expression hardened. The way a position hardens when it is challenged by someone it has already decided to dismiss. My staff exercised professional judgment. I stand behind it. "Your professional judgment," Marcus repeated, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. He thought about his father, 24 years, standing at a door, opening it for people who looked through him. The uniform worn thin at the cuffs, the way the old man would come home and sit at the kitchen table in the dark for a while before he could be anyone's father again. His father had never been bitter about it. Not exactly just tired in a particular way. Marcus had understood even as a boy. What his father had given him was not anger. It was clarity. And standing here now in the lobby of his own flagship resort, holding his sleeping child, Marcus felt that clarity settle over him like something solid. He was not going to reveal himself. Not yet. Because if this was happening times here, at the property meant to set the standard for everything else that bore his company's name. If a tired family could be turned away at sunset over a hoodie, then he needed to see the full shape of it before he did anything. Not for his own satisfaction, for every traveler who would walk up that path after him. But there was a person whose comfort he would not sacrifice to make his point. And that person was asleep on his shoulder. And so Marcus made one quiet decision. He would let this run exactly as long as it took to see the truth. And the moment it cost his son more than it was worth, he would end it. "I'd like your full name and your exact title," Marcus said. "Both of you. For the record," they gave them without warmth. Marcus noted them the way he noted everything quietly. Completely. Without making a show of it. Then he stepped back from the desk, found a low couch by the windows, settled Eli against his chest, and reached into his hoodie pocket for his phone. At Shapta, OPT. Vaughn did not return to wherever duty managers go at sunset. He stationed himself near the desk, watching Marcus the way a man watches a problem. He has decided to remove, but has not yet worked out how. Every minute or so, his eyes crossed the lobby to where Marcus sat with the sleeping boy. And each time his expression carried the same message: "You are still here. And I would prefer that you weren't." Marcus noticed. He noticed Vaughn murmur something to Trent that made the younger man straighten. He noticed Daniela at the concierge stand, her hands gone still, her eyes flicking again and again to the sleeping child. He noticed the well-dressed couple by the elevator grow quiet, their attention drifting toward him without committing. The lobby had developed that particular tension, the kind that forms when a room of people senses something is wrong and waits for someone else to name it first. Marcus had felt that tension in enough rooms over the course of his life to know its exact shape. It was the tension of people who knew something unfair was happening and had each decided, for their own reasons, that it was not their place to say so. He also watched his son, which was the only clock that mattered to him. Ellie slept on, warm and trusting. One fist still around Peanut's worn ear. And Marcus could see the long travel day in the boy's slack face. And he waited the exhaustion, the hunger that would come, the meltdown, waiting on the far side of all this, against the thing he had come to see. He would not let his boy wake up to a scene. He would let the truth surface. And not 1 second past the point his son could bear. At Shopte, unspreziche. Vaughn made his move. He crossed the lobby with the measured stride of a man performing authority rather than exercising it, and stopped a few feet from the couch, and spoke in the lowered voice that is designed to sound discreet while still being heard. Sir, I've given you time. This is private property. We've explained we can't accommodate you. And continuing to occupy our lobby, in front of our guests, at our busiest hour, is not something we'll permit. I'll ask you once to leave, before I involve our security team. Marcus looked up at him. I'm sitting on a couch with a sleeping 5-year-old. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a disruption. And you would rather call security on a man and his sleeping son than look up a reservation your own concierge already found in your own system. I'm not asking, Vaughn said. Something in the lobby shifted. One of the guests by the elevator turned fully. Daniela's head came up. Marcus looked at Vaughn's face at the certainty there. The complete and undisturbed confidence of a man who had never once considered he might be wrong, and felt something settle in his chest that was older and more deliberate than anger. Then call them, Marcus said. I want this to be official. Vaughn's jaw tightened. He turned and gave a short nod toward the far end of the lobby, where 2 security officers had apparently been waiting for exactly this signal. They came over with the patient heaviness of men who did this regularly, and positioned themselves on either side of the couch. And it was at that exact moment that Eli woke up. He came back all at once, the way small children do, blinking up into the golden light, taking in the 2 big men standing over his father, the tension in his father's body, the strange hard faces, and he sat up against Marcus's arm, clutching Peanut to his chest, and he looked at the security officers, and then he looked straight up at Vaughn, and he asked, in the clear, unhurried, carrying voice that children have in quiet rooms, are these the room men? My daddy said we could see the ocean. Is our room ready? The question went further than he meant it to. It reached the couple by the elevator, and the guests on the terrace, and Daniela at the concierge stand. Vaughn did not answer him. He looked at Marcus instead, which was its own kind of answer. Eli looked at the big men, and then back at the man in the suit who would not answer him, working it through with the serious patience of a 5-year-old who takes things literally. Daddy said we have a room with the ocean. He said. He told me, so why is that lady getting a key and we have to wait? He paused, and his small face did something then that no one in that lobby would forget it began. In real time, to fold toward a worry no child should have to carry. Did we do something bad? Are we not allowed? There was no accusation in it. It was entirely sincere, the question of a child for whom the behavior of the adults simply did not add up. A child arriving, live, in front of a room full of strangers, at the edge of the worst lesson a place like this can teach. And sincere questions, asked clearly by a small child in a quiet room, have a way of landing harder than anything rehearsed. The couple by the elevator had turned fully now, the woman's hand at her mouth. The guests on the terrace were no longer pretending to look elsewhere. One of the security officers, the one nearer the couch, shifted his weight in a way that said something in him had gone uneasy about where he was standing. And Daniela, at the concierge stand, had gone completely still, her eyes bright, her knuckles white on the edge of the wood. Marcus knelt down in front of his son and took the small face in his hand. And he held the boy's gaze. And he kept his voice warm and level the way he always did when he wanted Eli to understand that the world's ugliness was not his fault. You did not do one single thing wrong. Buddy, not one. You hear me? You're a good boy. And you and me, we belong anywhere we go. Anywhere. Don't you let anybody make you feel different. We are going to see that ocean. I promise you. He held the boy until Eli nodded and leaned back into him. And then he stood, slowly, and looked at Vaughn. Vaughn's face had changed. The certainty was still there, but something underneath it had cracked not into doubt, but into irritation. The child's question had drawn attention he hadn't wanted, had shifted the lobby in a way he could not immediately correct. And his answer to that was the answer of a certain kind of man, when he felt control slipping. He tightened his grip. "This has gone on long enough," Vaughn said, dropping all pretense of hospitality. He nodded to the officers. "Please escort them out." One officer moved forward. The other followed. And Marcus Reed stood slowly, careful with the boy, drawing Eli close against his chest. He did not resist. He did not raise his voice. But he did not move toward the door either. He stood in the center of the lobby he had built, his son in his arms, and looked at Vaughn with the expression of a man who has now seen everything he came to see and is deciding what to do with it. Several phones had appeared around the lobby, not held up, not made into a production, just there, angled, recording the specific geography of the moment. A black father in a gray hoodie, his 5-year-old son clutching a stuffed elephant, 2 security officers, and a duty manager whose face had already decided how this ended. And here, for one moment, it looked as though none of it would matter, as though the lobby would simply close over the injustice the way water closes over a stone. Because the safest thing in the world, for everyone watching, was to look away. The couple by the elevator could pick up their bags. The officers had their orders. Daniela had a job to lose. That is how it usually goes. The powerful man tightens his grip, and the room lets him win. Because everyone in it has a reason not to be the one who speaks. Marcus could feel that gravity pulling at the whole lobby. But Marcus Reed had his son in his arms. And he had seen exactly what he came to see. And he had watched the worry begin to settle onto the boy's face. And that was the line. He took out his phone. He found the number he wanted. He pressed call and brought it to his ear and said 4 sentences and listened for 10 seconds and ended the call. Then he put the phone back in his pocket, rested his hand on his son's back, and stood quietly and waited. "Daddy," Eli whispered, "just for him. Do we have to go? I'm tired." Marcus looked down at him. "No. Buddy," he said, "we're not going anywhere. We're going to see that ocean tonight. I promise." Vaughn heard it, and his patience snapped entirely. "Sir, I am telling you for the last time." The elevator chimed. It was a small sound, the kind that lobby made 100 times an evening without anyone noticing. But every person in that room noticed this one. The doors opened, and a woman stepped out, Eleanor Shaw, the chief executive of the Reed Coastal Group, silver-haired, in a dark blazer she had clearly pulled on in a hurry. Beside her came the resort's general manager and 2 members of the executive team, all moving with the barely contained urgency of people who understand exactly the weight of what they are walking into. Eleanor crossed the lobby directly to Marcus. She did not look at Trent. She did not look at Vaughn. She looked at Marcus and at the small boy clutched to his chest with the stuffed elephant, the way a person looks at someone they have just realized they have failed. And she stopped in front of him and said, with a formality that carried real weight, "Mr. Reed, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry you and your son were kept waiting and treated this way." The lobby went silent, not dramatically, the way rooms do in films, but the way rooms do in life, one sound at a time, until nothing was left but the soft guitar from the terrace. which seemed suddenly and completely wrong for the occasion. Then Eleanor turned to face the front desk, and her voice was even, which somehow made it worse than if she had shouted. I want everyone in this lobby to understand who this is. This is Marcus Reed. He is the founder and sole owner of the Reed Coastal Group. He built this resort. He owns the couches you're standing beside, the driftwood on that desk, the sand this building sits on, and the contracts that determine whether any of us work here tomorrow. She let it sit for exactly one breath, and he just spent half an hour being called trash, being refused his own prepaid reservation, and being threatened with removal in front of his 5-year-old son because of what he was wearing. I want every person in this room to be very clear about what happened here tonight. Trent had gone the color of the marble floor. Vaughn had not moved, standing in the center of the lobby with the particular stillness of a man whose entire understanding of the situation has just been restructured, and who has not yet worked out how to exist inside the new version of it. Eli looked up at Eleanor, then at his father, then back at Eleanor. He pulled Peanut a little tighter and leaned into Marcus's chest. Daddy, he whispered. Does that lady work for you? Marcus looked down at his son, and for the first time since they had come through those doors, something in his face softened all the way. He crouched and looked the boy in the eye. Yeah. Buddy? She does. And listen, this is the important part. So I need you to hear me. He tapped Peanut's soft ear gently. Nothing about us changed in the last half hour. Same hoodie, same sneakers, same you, same me. The only thing that changed is what they know. A person's worth was never about the clothes they're wearing. You remember that? Okay? Always. Eli nodded slowly, and Marcus could see him filing it away in the deep, permanent place where children keep the things their parents tell them in moments like this one. Nobody moved. That was the thing Marcus noticed most in the seconds after Eleanor finished the complete absence of motion in a room that minutes before had been building towards something loud and certain. Vaughn was still standing in the middle of the floor. Trent had both hands flat on the desk as if he needed it to stay upright. The 2 security officers had stepped back without being told, instinctively creating distance from a situation that had just fundamentally changed shape. Even the guests who had been recording had lowered their phones. Caught between the urge to document and the sense that this required something more than a screen, Marcus looked at the room. He looked at each face in turn, not with triumph, not with the satisfaction of a man who has won something, but with the careful attention of someone taking inventory of exactly what he was seeing. Trent found his voice first, which was either brave or foolish, and was, in this case, probably both. Mr. Reed, I want to explain, we had no way of knowing who you were. We weren't. Each sentence started with confidence and ran out of it before reaching a period. He was not lying. Exactly. He genuinely had not known who Marcus was. But Marcus had spent enough time in enough rooms to know that not knowing is not the same as not being responsible, and Trent knew it too. Somewhere underneath the scrambling, which was why none of his sentences could find their endings. And here something happened that no one had scripted. The well-dressed woman by the elevator, the one who had given the uncomfortable laugh, the silent witness, the one who had looked away stepped forward, and her voice shook, but she said it anyway. To the room. I heard every word that man said to him and his little boy, and I laughed. I'm ashamed of myself. I would want every single word of it on the record. She looked at Marcus, and then at the sleepy child, and stepped back beside her husband. And she did not look away from anyone for the rest of the evening. It was a small thing. It was also the thing the whole lobby had been waiting for someone to do. And once one person had done it, the air changed for good. Marcus let Trent's silence settle. He did not interrupt, did not shift his expression, did not give the man anything to push against or cling to. He simply waited until the words ran out entirely. And then he spoke. "You're right," Marcus said. "You didn't know who I was. That's the whole point." His voice carried across the lobby without effort, not because he raised it, but because everything else had gone so quiet. "Everything you did tonight, you did because you looked at me and decided my son wasn't worth your standard. Not because of anything I said. Not because of anything he did. Because of what I looked like when I carried him through that door. You booked an oceanfront suite for a couple who walked in off the same path I did, while threatening to call security on a man holding a sleeping child. And you did it in front of him. You let a 5-year-old start to wonder, out loud, in a room full of strangers, whether he'd done something bad, whether he wasn't allowed somewhere, because of how his daddy was dressed. That is the one thing I will never forgive. Not what you did to me, what you started to teach my son about himself." Trent opened his mouth. Marcus continued, his voice still level, still unhurried. "My father stood at the door of a resort like this one for 24 years. He opened it for people who looked straight through him. And he came home, carrying the weight of being decided about by strangers who'd made up their minds before he said a word. I built this company because I believed that didn't have to be how it works. That the tired traveler standing at your desk at sunset deserves dignity before he's proven a single thing to you, before you've checked his sneakers. Before you've decided whether he looks like he belongs. Before." He looked at Eleanor, who gave a short nod, and then back at Trent. "You didn't just fail a guest tonight. You looked at an exhausted child and decided he could be sent down the highway in the dark. Because of the man carrying him. And you did it in front of that child." Trent attempted one more sentence. It didn't make it far. "You're terminated," Marcus said quietly. "Effective immediately." He looked at Eleanor, who stepped aside to make the call. Trent's face settled into something gray and inward. Whatever argument he had left, he chose not to use it. He straightened his cuffs, once the small, automatic gesture of a man trying to preserve the last intact piece of his dignity, and walked toward the back office without another word. Then Marcus turned to Vaughn, who had not moved. "You were given a chance the moment you walked up to this desk. Your own concierge had already found my reservation in the system. A young woman, 6 weeks into her first job, did the one thing you, with all your years and your suit, refused to do. You chose, instead, to threaten a sleeping child with security, rather than spend 10 seconds checking whether the family in front of you was telling the truth." He held the man's gaze. "That isn't judgment. That's a man so certain of who doesn't belong that he wouldn't even look at the truth sitting in his own computer. You're terminated as well. And I'd ask you to think, on your way out, about why a clerk could see my son clearly, and you could not." Vaughn's jaw worked. He found nothing to say. He turned and went. But Marcus Reed did not build his life on punishment. And this story does not end on the men who were fired. Because the lesson his father gave him with 24 years of standing at a door was never, not for a single second, only about the cruel. It was always about the people who do the right thing when it costs them something. Marcus turned and walked to the concierge stand, where Daniela had stood through all of it, her hands flat on the wood, her eyes never once leaving the child. He stopped in front of her and kept his voice low. "Just for her. You found the reservation," he said. "You knew the truth in 30 seconds. And you said it out loud. And your manager sent you away for it. And you didn't go. You stood right there. I understand exactly how hard that was, 6 weeks in. With a man who could end your job standing over you. That you did it anyway tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Daniela opened her mouth, and Marcus went on before she could speak. "The people who run a place like this should be the people who, when a tired family is standing in front of them being decided about, look times, and then act on what they see. That's you. Starting tomorrow, you're moving into a guest relations supervisory role, with a real title and a real voice. Because I need people in positions where they're actually allowed to do the thing you just did when no one gave you permission. Daniela looked at him for a long moment, her eyes moving through several things before settling somewhere between relief and resolve. I won't let you down, she said. I know, Marcus said simply. That's why I'm asking. And then? Because the evening had its own justice. An older man came forward, a bellhop named Reggie, who had worked the Azure Crest's front entrance for 18 years. The longest of anyone there. He had been standing near the doors. And he came to Marcus now, turning his cap in his hands, unable to fully meet his eyes. He said he was ashamed. He said he had watched families get turned away like this before. Not often, but more than once, and each time he had told himself it wasn't his place. That the managers knew the guests. That it was above his station to question it. And tonight he had watched a little boy ask whether he'd done something bad. And he did not think he would ever stop hearing it. Marcus did not lecture him. He had no use for that. He said only, then be the one who speaks up next time. That's how a person squares it. Not with me, with the next child who comes through that door, in the arms of someone the room has already decided about. Be the one who says something. And Reggie nodded slowly. Like something heavy he had carried for 18 years had finally been set down where it belonged. Then Marcus turned to face the lobby, the guests who remained. The staff. The security officers who had not asked to be put in the middle of it. He spoke without preamble. The way he had learned to speak, when the thing that needed saying did not improve, with decoration. I have been building places for people to rest for a long time. And there is exactly one standard I have never been willing to negotiate. Every guest who comes through these doors is treated with dignity, and every parent who carries a tired child up to this desk is treated with respect before they prove a single thing. Not based on what they're wearing, not based on what they look like, not based on whether they seem like they belong in a place like this. Every family, every time. No exceptions. That is what this company Times is. He looked around the lobby one last time at the desk. At the windows full of gold water. At the marble floor his own father had only ever been allowed to cross in a doorman's uniform. If anyone who works here cannot commit to that, I would genuinely rather you found somewhere else to work. Not as a threat, just as the truth of what we are. The room held the words for a moment. And then Eli, who had been standing beside his father through all of it with Peanut tucked under his arm and the serious, focused expression of a 5-year-old determined to understand the world correctly, tugged once on his hand. Daddy, he said, can we see the ocean times now? You promised. It moved through the lobby like something released, not quite laughter, but the thing adjacent to it, the sound a room full of people makes when a held breath finally finds somewhere to go. Even Eleanor pressed her lips together. Marcus crouched down in front of his son. And the thing that had been sitting in his chest all evening finally shifted, not gone. Just moved into something with more room in it. Yeah. Buddy? He said. Let's go see the ocean. Right now. And he carried his boy out through the glass doors onto the terrace, where the last of the sun was sinking gold and pink into the water. And he set him down at the rail. And the two of them stood there together, watching the waves come in exactly as it should have happened the moment they walked in. Exactly as it would have happened for any tired family whose father had worn a different coat. 3 months later, on a quiet weekday evening, a father came through the doors of the Azure Crest carrying a sleeping toddler, a diaper bag over one shoulder, and the wary, braced look of a man who had been made to feel small at a front desk before. He was in a delivery company's polo shirt, clearly straight off a shift, traveling on a hard-saved family trip and he had the careful posture of someone expecting to be turned away. Daniela was at the front of the house when they came in. She crossed the lobby to meet them before they reached the desk, introduced herself by name, and lowered her voice so as not to wake the sleeping child. She did not look at the polo shirt or the worn diaper bag. She looked at the man's tired eyes and at the small head on his shoulder, and she said, "Welcome to the Azure Crest. Let's get you checked in quickly and quietly so we don't wake this little one. And then I'll walk you up to your room myself." Within 2 minutes, the father's shoulders had come down from around his ears. Within 5, he was sitting in a quiet corner with a glass of iced tea he had not asked for, and Dalla, his child, still asleep, his keycard in his hand. In the far corner of the lobby, Marcus stood with Eli beside him. He had come for a scheduled visit this time, in a jacket instead of a hoodie, though Eli had still brought Peanut, who had now apparently been to the ocean enough times to be considered an expert on it. They had been there 10 minutes, and Marcus had not announced himself to the floor, because he wanted to see this first. The ordinary work of the place. The everyday version of the thing he had spent his life trying to build. A great deal had changed in 3 months, and most of it would never make a video or a headline. Because the most important changes never do. Every frontline hire across the entire Reed Coastal Group now went through the same thing. Trent had refused to learn. Not a skills course, but a values one. Built around an exercise in which staff sat for 1 uncomfortable hour on the other side of the desk, as the family being decided about. Front desk procedure had been rewritten so that no manager could ever again overrule a clerk who had simply looked up a guest's reservation. The truth in the system now carried the weight, not the blazer. And quietly, without a press release, Marcus had endowed something he called the Open Door Fund, named for his father, the doorman, covering a free stay. No questions asked. For working families who could never otherwise afford a single night at the sea. Its plaque hung where the staff would pass it every shift, not where guests would see it. The first families it served were exactly the kind of families Trent had been so proud of turning away. Eli watched Daniela lead the delivery driver and his sleeping toddler toward the elevators. Watched the man exhale. Watched a stranger's child be carried up to a room with nothing but welcome. Then he looked up at his father. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" he asked the same boy. The same serious, careful way of taking the world apart to understand it. Except not worried now. Just curious. Marcus watched the tired father step into the elevator with his child and his keycard and his iced tea. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what it's supposed to look like." Eli considered this with the quiet thoroughness he brought to most things. Then he nodded once, tucked Peanut under his arm, and reached up to take his father's hand. Marcus held it, and they stood there together, in the corner of the lobby he had built into what it was always supposed to be, the place a doorman's son had sworn. Somewhere in 24 years of watching his father be looked through, that he would one day make for every family who came up the path in the wrong clothes. Mounted on the wall behind the front desk, now the very spot where a man had once leaned over the driftwood and told a father his sleeping son didn't belong, there was a small brass plate. It carried no founder's name and no slogan. It carried a single line. The line Marcus's father used to say at the kitchen table at the end of a long shift. "You learn who a place is by how it treats the one it thinks doesn't matter." And down the staff corridor, where no guest would ever see it, hung one framed photograph, a tired man in a doorman's uniform worn thin at the cuffs. And beneath it, the dates of 24 years of standing at a door. And nothing else. Because the people who needed to understand it would. And the people who didn't could walk past. Daniela passed it now. leading the delivery driver's family back from the elevator with an extra towel for the morning. And she touched the frame once. The way you touch something for luck. The way you touch something that is watching over the room. And she kept walking. This story is fiction. Marcus isn't real. Ellie isn't real. Trent and Vaughn aren't real. And neither is the Azure Crest. But the man straightening his cuffs is real. He is standing behind some desk right now, a resort's front desk. A hotel counter. The threshold of some bright and beautiful place you and I might carry a tired child into. Hopeful and out of place and dressed in the wrong clothes. And he is deciding in about 4 seconds. By the cut of a hoodie and the wear on a pair of sneakers, who belongs and who should be sent down the highway in the dark. Whose child is worth the standard and whose can wait. That happens every single day. In rooms like that one all over this world. To people who own nothing and never will. And to a great many who have given more than the person turning them away could ever guess. Every guest deserves dignity. And every parent deserves respect. Before they prove anything, before they show you what they have. Before you decide whether they belong. That isn't just good hospitality. Or good business. It is simply what is right. And the cruelest thing a place can do is not turn a grown man away. It is to let a child stand in its lobby and begin, in real time, to wonder out loud whether he did something bad, whether he isn't allowed somewhere to start learning. At 5 years old, that there is something about him that makes him less welcome than the next child. Something he did not do and cannot name and would carry for the rest of his life. So let me ask you, before you go, the next time you watch someone get looked up and down and quietly sent away, the father in the worn hoodie, the mother with the secondhand bag, the family, the room has already made up its mind about which one are you going to be. The one who gives the uncomfortable laugh and looks at the floor and tells yourself it isn't your place, or the one who steps forward, the way a young concierge once did, with everything to lose, and says, I found the reservation, they belong here, let me walk them up myself. Tell me down in the comments about a time someone made you feel like you didn't belong, and a time someone made sure you did. I want to hear both. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder tonight, and subscribe. Because every week we find the people the world looked past, and we tell their stories. Don't be a Trent. Be a Daniela. And whatever you do, however, the parent and child at your door happen to be dressed, remember that you learn who a place is, and who a person is, by how they treat the one they think doesn't matter.